Yo, to Shifty Crew, what is good with y'all today? It's your boy Bwithdashifts. Today we got 3 scary, true summer backyard horror stories. Shout out Mr. Nightmare. I'm waiting for Chilling Scares to drop another video so I can react to it. But make sure y'all go follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/Bwithdashifts1. Let's get straight to it. Live every day, 8 p.m. CT, by the way. Okay. Oh. Wow.
It was the summer of 2011. I was 13 years old. Life was good. Social media hadn't taken over the world yet, and kids still knew how to be kids. It was July, my birthday month. My birthday had just passed a few days earlier. I vividly remember that because when I had a couple friends over, we ate some of the leftover ice cream cake in the yard. My family wasn't home. It was a sunny day. I was allowed to have my friends Kyle and Zook over. We used to call him Zook, which was a shortened nickname for his last name. When home alone, I was supposed to not leave the property, but I could have my friends over as long as we hung out in the house or the backyard. We grew up in a basic Westchester, New York suburban neighborhood. Zook and Kyle both rode their bikes to my house. It was so nice out that instead of playing video games inside or anything like that, we played sports in the backyard. Okay. Our family home in Westchester, that my parents still live in to this day, has a super big backyard. It was perfect for games like baseball and soccer. Sometimes we'd roughhouse and wrestle in the backyard, and when we had an odd number of people, we would have the others referee. Today, we were play wrestling. We were mimicking the WWE, taking on roles of actual wrestlers at the time. And we would do this corny thing where whichever wrestler we were pretending to be, we'd use their specific moves and fighting styles. So the backyard is a unique shape. It has an awning right by the back door with a bunch of patio furniture underneath. Then there's 2 steps down to the grass area that starts narrow but opens up wider the further into the yard you go. Westchester is pretty known for having houses like this. While we were playing, I looked up at one of the upstairs bedroom windows, and despite the glare on the glass from the sun, I saw someone standing at the window of my parents' bedroom looking out to the yard. Remember, I said my family wasn't meant to be home. When I yelled time out and pointed up at the window, they walked away. My friends didn't see it in time. I told them someone's upstairs, and I hurried towards the back door, telling my friends I'm just checking who's home.
Bro, you're a little kid. Why are you checking there? I would be running off. I would be to the neighbor's house immediately. I would get my chips, and then I would dip. I'm not gonna lie. I see something and I'm a little kid. I used to be scared of running up the stairs when I turned the lights out. What makes you think I was gonna go check a stranger inside of my house? Yeah, you can have the house, my guy. I'm dipping.
I went inside and called out my older sister's name and then my mom and dad. From downstairs, no one answered. So I went to the stairway that led from the den to the main floor.
The den.
And I called up again.
Okay, the den.
No answer. I heard creaking from all the way upstairs though, so I knew someone was home. But I also knew no one was supposed to be. So I went to the landline phone in the den office and called my mom. No response.
Okay.
I then called my dad. No response. I tried both phones again, and that failed again. I didn't even know my sister's cell phone, which I know was weird, but I never really had a reason to call her at that age. I didn't really know why no one was picking up. Maybe it was because my parents got home and set their phones down somewhere. So I went upstairs to the main floor of the house by the front door. I went to look out the front window, and sure enough, neither of my parents' cars were in the driveway. The last person that could be in the house was my sister, which I wondered why she would be in my parents' room. I called up my sister's name to the upstairs floor of the house. I heard footsteps once again, this time more clearly. They came from right upstairs, just around the wall. I believe it was at this moment that I said my sister's name one more time. I looked up the stairs, and I saw something at the top. There was a bare foot protruding out from behind the wall ever so slightly, pointing towards the stairs. It looked like a man's foot. Whoever it was hiding upstairs just around the corner. It wasn't anyone in my family. I walked down the stairs back to the den without making it obvious I was running. I then ran full speed for the office phone. Then I ran outside to my friends. I told them about the intruder in the house while frantically calling my mom and dad's numbers over and over. Finally, my mom picked up, sounding almost annoyed that I kept calling.
Why don't they just run?
Her annoyance was short-lived after I told her someone was in the house. She asked me why I was calling her and not the police, and she told me to hang up and call 911. As I did, Zook said, "Yo, look," and pointed at one of the upstairs rooms. This time it was my room.
Dang.
At the window was a person. Once again, no distinguishable features because of the sun glare. Only a second after I looked, they walked away from the window again.
Wow.
This entirely confirmed the nightmarish situation that was going on.
Why would they not
I
run?
called 911, the first and only time in my life that I'd had to do that, and I nervously told them about the
Why
intruder.
would they not run?
It felt like a pretty
Wait.
standard 911 call
Okay.
from what you'd expect. She told me to wait outside where we were with my friends,
Okay.
and that a car was being sent to the given address. It was a relatively fast response time. I guess that's Westchester for you. When there was a bang at the backyard gate, the person banging announced himself as a police officer, and he came out back. I told him to go inside because the intruder is upstairs somewhere.
Dang.
He hurried inside with his partner, and minutes later, they came back outside with a man handcuffed. Not just a normal-looking man. This man looked disheveled and high. He was half naked. He looked wobbly. Most importantly, he looked unstable and dangerous. He was slurring profanities at the cops. I called my mom again to tell her, and then
And that's what drugs do to you. Don't do drugs, kids.
put her on the phone with one of the cops. She handled, I guess, figuring out what happened next. I went inside to check what was stolen, and it was mostly just the drawers in every bedroom that had been rummaged through.
Dang.
Nothing outwardly appeared to have been stolen. As far as how that man got inside, I think it simply came down to an unlocked door, nothing crazy. Still, to experience a stranger breaking into your house is something you think you only hear about in stories and on the news, but not actually in real life. And it was downright horrific.
Yep. Story 2 by Tommy. Tommy, man. What is Tom doing, man?
This happened last summer when my older brother Ben asked me to stay at his house for the weekend while he and his fiancée went away. They had planned a short trip together months in advance, and all he needed was someone to watch his chocolate lab Bear. I had watched Bear plenty of times before, so I agreed without thinking much about it. Ben lived about 25 minutes outside town in a quiet rural area. There were neighbors, but every house sat on a few acres, and his backyard was surrounded by woods on 3 sides. They were not huge forests, just stretches of woods broken up by trails that people used for walking and biking. Bear loved those trails, so Ben told me to take him out a couple times a day like he normally did. I got there Friday afternoon after they left and settled in. Nothing happened that day. Bear was his usual friendly self, and we went on an evening walk before I watched TV and went to bed. Saturday started the same way. I let Bear out early, fed him, made breakfast, and took him on one of the trails around mid-morning. It was warm out, but not unbearable, and there were enough trees to keep the trail shaded. We walked for probably 20 minutes before Bear suddenly stopped. His ears stood straight up, and he stared into the trees off to our left. At first, I just stood there waiting for him to move. I thought he heard a squirrel or a deer. There was plenty of wildlife around there. I gave the leash a little tug, but he barely reacted.
Okay.
He just kept listening. After maybe 30 seconds, he started walking again. But every few steps, he turned around to look behind us. I remember laughing to myself and saying he was acting paranoid. The farther we walked, the more he kept looking back. At one point, he even stopped again and faced the direction we had just come from. I looked back too and saw absolutely nothing.
Trust
The trail
their
behind us was empty.
instincts, you
No
idiot.
people or bikes. Nothing moving between the trees. I nudged him forward again, and eventually we finished the loop and headed back to the house. Once we were home, he acted completely normal again. The rest of the afternoon
I'm not gonna lie. You trust the dog's instincts no matter what, man. You do.
was uneventful. I watched TV, threw a tennis ball around the backyard with Bear, and later that evening, I started watching Game of Thrones in Ben's living room. Bear was stretched out on the couch next to me asleep. It was already dark outside by then,
Yeah.
probably around 9:30, and that's when someone knocked on the front door. It immediately caught my attention because it felt strange hearing someone knock that late in such a quiet area. I muted the TV and walked over. I didn't open the door. I just stood there and asked who it was. A man answered from the other side, asking me if Tom was home. Hearing my own first name caught me off guard. I asked, "Tom who?" The man gave a completely different last name that wasn't mine. I told him he had the wrong house and that nobody by that name lived here. There was a
Okay.
pause before he calmly replied that he didn't think he had the wrong house.
Wow.
That answer made me uncomfortable. I told him again that he did, and that I'd appreciate it if he left. I stood there another 20 or 30 seconds waiting for another response, but nothing came.
Close the door in
Eventually,
his face.
I walked over to the window beside the living room and carefully looked through the blinds. I couldn't see anyone on the porch. I waited another minute before checking the front yard from a different window, but I still didn't see anyone.
He's in the
I figured whoever
backyard.
it was had finally left. I locked the deadbolts, even though I was pretty sure it had already been locked, and went back to watching TV.
Okay.
Bear had lifted
You're
his head
cooked,
during
man.
the knocking, but laid back down
You're
once
cooked,
everything
man.
got quiet again. Around
You're
11 that
cooked,
night,
man.
Bear started whining by the back door. He had been asleep for a while, so I figured he needed to go out one last time before bed. I
You're
clipped his
cooked,
leash
man.
on, opened the sliding door, and stepped out onto the back deck with him. The backyard had a few lights mounted on the house that lit
Idiot.
up the back deck and some
Idiot.
of the grass, but beyond that, it was almost completely dark.
Idiot, man.
The tree line started maybe 50 yards from the house,
Idiot.
and once your eyes reached the woods, you couldn't really see anything beyond the first few trees. Bear walked down the deck steps into the yard like normal, but before he got very far, he froze.
Okay.
His ears went up exactly like they had that
Idiot.
morning on the trail. This time he wasn't just listening. He started growling. It was low at first, then louder. I looked toward the woods, trying to see what had his
Idiot.
attention. For a second, I saw nothing. Then I caught movement.
Somebody.
A person ran.
So you're telling me somebody was wanting to be at your house? They said your name. You're a kid, and then your dog is sitting there growling. You don't yell for it to come inside. You're an idiot, man.
Across the edge of the tree line and disappeared into the woods. It happened fast, but there was no mistaking it. It wasn't an animal. It was someone running.
Idiot.
Before I even had time to react,
Idiot.
Bear exploded forward.
Wow.
The leash slipped right through my hand.
Wow.
He sprinted across the yard toward the woods,
Wow.
barking as loud as I had ever heard him bark. I immediately took off after him, yelling his name over and
Wow.
over. By the time I reached the tree line,
That's
he was
crazy.
already gone into the woods. I didn't even think about grabbing a
Wow.
flashlight. I just ran in after him because I wasn't about to lose my brother's dog.
You have no survival skills, my guy. You would not be trusted enough in a survival movie. If me and you were stranded on an island together, I'm killing you and eating you, Jeffrey Dahmer style. I don't care, man. You're not useful at all. No survival skills.
In seconds, I couldn't see Bear anymore. I could still hear him barking somewhere ahead, but the trees blocked everything. It was much darker under the
Idiot.
canopy than I expected. I slowed down because I could barely see where I was going. I kept yelling Bear's name, hoping he'd come back, but all I heard were his barks further ahead.
Wow.
Then I heard footsteps. At first I thought they were Bear, but they sounded different. They were heavier and seemed to come from off to one side instead of straight ahead. I stopped moving. The footsteps stopped too.
Wow, okay.
I listened for several seconds. Bear barked again somewhere deeper in the woods. Then I heard another set of footsteps behind me. I turned around but couldn't see anything. It was too dark. I couldn't tell if there was one person moving around me or more than one. Every few seconds, I'd hear another step somewhere different. It honestly felt like someone was circling through the trees, staying just out of sight. I suddenly realized how exposed I was. I didn't know the trails well enough in the dark. I had no flashlight, and I had no idea who had just been standing outside my brother's backyard.
Bro.
My heart started racing. I yelled Bear's name one more time as loud as I could, but instead of running further into the woods, I turned around and sprinted back toward the house.
Wow.
Branches were hitting my arms and face as I pushed through the trees. I didn't stop until I reached the backyard where the deck lights were shining. I stood near the deck, breathing hard, staring back into the darkness while yelling Bear's name over and over. For almost a full minute, nothing happened. Then I heard him barking again, much closer this time. A few seconds later, Bear came bursting out of the woods at full speed. He ran straight toward me and up onto the deck,
What in the world?
but instead of coming to the door, he stopped at the top step and turned back toward the woods. He stood there completely still, staring into the darkness with his ears up. I grabbed his collar as hard as I could and practically dragged him through the sliding door before slamming it shut and locking it. We stayed inside the rest of the night.
Dang.
I checked every window and made sure every door was locked.
That's crazy, man.
I considered calling the police, but all I could really tell them was that I saw someone run into the woods.
Yeah.
I had no description and no proof they were still around.
Yeah.
Bear never fully relaxed.
Can't call the
Several
cops
times
on
while I
that.
sat in the living room, he suddenly lifted his head and stared toward different walls of the house as if he was hearing something outside. Every time he did it, I'd stop and listen too, but I never heard anything. I stayed awake until 4 in the morning before exhaustion finally caught up with me. The next morning, I went outside after the sun came up and walked to the backyard and edge of the woods looking for anything unusual. I was hoping to find footprints, dropped items, or anything that explained what happened. I found absolutely nothing. Later that afternoon, Ben and his fiancée came home. I immediately told him everything that happened, from Bear acting strange on the trail to the knock on the door and the person running into the woods. What surprised me most was Ben's reaction. He got quiet for a second, before telling me something similar had happened to him about a year ago. Bear had acted almost the exact same way in the backyard one night, and Ben had also caught a glimpse of someone disappearing into the woods. He looked around afterward and never found out who it was. Nothing else ever happened after that, so eventually, he stopped thinking about it. Hearing that made the whole thing even harder to explain. I packed my things and headed home that evening, but I couldn't stop thinking about the fact that someone had apparently been watching the house on more than one occasion.
That's crazy.
Ben and his fiancée still live there today, and thankfully they haven't had another incident since then. Even so, every time I visit and let Bear into that backyard after dark, I find myself staring at those woods a little longer than I used to.
That's crazy, man. Knew the ad was coming.
My name is Dave, and I'm 35 years old. I grew up with a pretty small family. I have 2 brothers, and that's it. We don't have any cousins or anything. These days, the norm, at least in the US, is to have kids in your late 20s or early 30s. My brothers and I all had kids really young, I guess because we wanted to grow our family. My brothers' names are Pete and Jim. We live in Jasper, Georgia. Our kids are all around the ages of 3 to 10.
Georgia.
Each of us have 2 kids. This story happened very recently, actually, in May of 2026. We like to have a lot of barbecues at my house. For Memorial Day, I invited Pete and Jim and their families over for a barbecue, along with our parents. My wife Nancy and I started setting up early. Our backyard is the best for hosting out of all of us because we have a pool and a big entertaining area, along with a big open grass area for the kids to play. Our neighborhood is pretty quiet and spacious, so instead of our neighbors' yards being right next to ours, we have woods in the backyard. In all honesty, we have the cliche home setup for a horror movie. Everyone came over around 1 p.m. Things went how a typical backyard Memorial Day gathering would go for us. We drank beers throughout the day, ate barbecue, and jumped in the pool. The kids played various games in the pool and field, and the hours flew by like this. Nightfall came, and we eventually had ice cream and dessert. And during this time, we heard the most blood-curdling scream from out in the woods. Everyone stiffened up and went silent, and only after maybe 10 seconds did we finally speak up. The first question was asked by Jim, and he asked if that was a fox. I said no way. I hear fox screams somewhat often here, and I know the sound. This sounded very human. We kept the music off now, and there was definitely a tense feeling in the air now. The kids were visibly shaken, but it could have just been some local teenagers messing around on Memorial Day. But when we heard the same blood-curdling scream a second time, we told the kids to go inside. In fact, everyone except my brothers and I went inside. The 3 of us went to the edge of the woods and waited there for a few minutes, waiting for another scream that never came. Eventually, I screamed out into the woods asking if someone needs help. This didn't lead to any kind of response. Needless to say, this really put a damper on the rest of our celebration outside, so we started bringing stuff inside and spent the rest of the night inside. The topic of conversation was the screams for a little while, but eventually we moved past it and dismissed it as some teenage Memorial Day shenanigans. Eventually, the night was coming to a close and everyone started heading out. Our parents left first, then my brothers and their families. I'd call it 10 p.m. when they were all gone. We cleaned up a bit more, eventually said we'll do the rest tomorrow, and started getting ready for bed. The kids were already asleep by this point. Nancy and I were exhausted and climbed into bed. And then
Okay.
a sound that you never expect nor want to hear at this hour of the night. The doorbell. The doorbell
Yeah, you're
rang and
cooked.
made Nancy and I instantly shoot to
You're
an upright
cooked, my
position
guy.
and look at each other. "Who do you think that is?" she asked me.
Wow.
To which I said, "Maybe one of my brothers forgot something."
Dang.
I got out of bed and went downstairs to the front door.
Okay.
Without opening the door,
Wow.
I said, "Who is it?" And a man on the other side said, "Hey, can you open up? It's important." I was not opening that front
Yo.
door to an unidentified stranger at that hour,
Bro.
so I responded,
it's not
"Can you
slick."
identify yourself?"
Okay.
He then said, "It's your neighbor down the road." I responded, "Which
Dang.
one? What's your name?" He responded, "Jack." I didn't know any Jacks. I asked him for his exact address.
Bro.
I would know if it was a real address or not.
Okay.
But after I asked this, there was dead silence. I repeated my question, but instead of him answering, I heard footsteps walking off the front deck.
Yo.
My question scared them away. Who was that person? Surely it wasn't actually a neighbor. They were trying to get me to open the door.
Yup, that.
This
yeah,
prompted me
was.
to check to make sure every door and window was locked. When I told Nancy about
Okay.
the weird encounter, she started to freak out and went to check on the kids. I eventually was able to calm her down, but I agreed with her that it was a very scary encounter. We went to sleep eventually out of sheer exhaustion. The nightmare didn't truly begin until about an hour or two later when I awoke to Nancy shaking me. She told me she heard what sounded like the garage door closing.
Bro, what in the
Our garage
world?
doors manually opened and closed. I never
Oh,
bothered
shoot.
fixing the mechanisms for the automatic open-close feature.
Oh, so he's
But
got an easy way
If
to
what
get
she
in the
heard
house.
was true, that meant we
Wow,
didn't
wow.
lock the garage door. My heart started racing right away.
Wow.
I have a .22 pistol in my bedside drawer that I keep for potential home defense situations.
Yep.
I grabbed it and told Nancy to wait there. She told me not to go, but
Wow.
I had to. I quietly went down the stairs.
Wow.
Each step, the
Okay.
fear of the situation setting in even more. When I got to the bottom,
Wow.
the door that leads into the garage from inside the house was just down the hall to the right. I tiptoed over, and I saw that this door was locked. So, if what Nancy heard wasn't just a dream or imagination, that meant someone was still inside there.
Wow.
I put my ear up to the door for a second and listened. I couldn't hear anything. I unlocked the door as quietly as possible, and it took me a minute to gather the courage to grab the doorknob. When I finally did, I yanked the door open and aimed the gun up in front of me. I looked inside the garage. I didn't turn the light on yet, but there was a small red light on the work desk coming from a tool charger. It lit up this little corner of the garage where I saw the outline of a person. I knew
you're
it had
cooked,
to be.
man.
I saw in the
You're
darkness the
cooked.
figure
It's
swaying a
fine,
little
you're
back and
cooked.
forth in this
It'll
weird
be
way.
over quick.
The sight made me want to
It'll
throw
be
up.
over super quick, man.
I
It's
announced
all
that I
good.
had a gun, and I locked my aim onto the
It's all
swaying
good,
black
man.
mass in the corner. My heart nearly
You're
dropped
more
out
than
of me
cooked,
when the
my
black
guy.
mass fully moved towards the garage door, and the door then lifted
You're
up
cooked.
just enough for them to run out and escape before the door fell back down to the floor. Only then did I
Wow.
turn on the garage light and run to lock the garage door. The whole thing was over in less than a minute.
Wow.
I couldn't even process it fully yet.
That's
I
crazy,
ran to the phone
man.
to call the sheriff's office and reported a break-in. Upon their arrival, I told them of the screams in the woods, the man at the front door, and the person in the garage, all while Nancy